Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Drums webinar, the CMO Challenge, Lessons from L'Oreal UK and Ireland in partnership with Domo. My name is Naomi Taylor and I'm your host for today, and I'm joined by the fantastic Chris Fender, Head of Digital Operations and Measurement at L'Oreal UK and Ireland. This is the second episode of the CMO Challenge series, where we're exploring what makes the CMO of today tick. What are the obstacles in their way? How can they improve their ROI through various digital in-house strategies? We want to look at how tech can help extend the life cycle of the CMO and just what can make things a bit easier for them. So today we're really lucky to have Chris with us. Welcome.
Thank you.
And he's going to be looking at L'Oreal's brand case study and sharing his own tips and tricks for keeping on top of things like data measurement, process and tech, so that he can successfully improve L'Oreal UK and Ireland's marketing operations. We do run a very interactive webinar at the Drums, so please feel free to pop in any questions you might have for Chris in the chat box at the side of your screen, and we can answer them at the end for you. So Chris, to kick things off before you crack into all your tips and tricks, what do you think is the biggest challenge facing the CMO today?
Cool, thank you. And good morning, everyone. I think for me, the biggest challenge or opportunity for the CMO at the moment is really enhancing the technology that the company can employ. So at L'Oreal UK and Ireland, we're very much looking at how we can combine kind of traditional kind of marketing expertise with some of the kind of modern innovations within digital. And I think for me, that's the biggest challenge. It's blending those two worlds together to really maximize the opportunities of both areas. So if I kind of roll into the presentation. So as I say, I'm here really to talk for L'Oreal's digital transformation, my role as head of digital operations, and then some of the opportunities I face at L'Oreal UK and Ireland. So this lovely screen in front of us. Sorry, apologies. This is our reception area at London Hammersmith UK and Ireland. So this greets our nearly 1,000 staff each day. And as you can see on the pillars to the left and right hand side, we have an awful lot of brands that appeal to many different customers across the UK and Ireland. So from mass to luxury to salons and spas. So the culture of the UK and I group is really to push technology forward and beauty forward and using innovation to really speak to the customers that love these brands every single day. So it's honestly a huge education for me every day. It's a fantastic and wonderful place to work. And I can go from a meeting about how we're going to launch a new product to how we're using artificial intelligence to help our recruitment drives, to understanding how we can be more effective on voice devices. So huge plethora of innovation and technology that exists within the UK and Ireland group. So this is a word cloud that I borrowed from Wikipedia. It captures a lot of the buzzwords that are happening in the industry right now, and it's very relatable to what I see on a daily basis. So as I said, L'Oreal UK and Ireland is an amazing kind of place to work. That it embraces digital, it embraces new technology, and it's very open about innovation. So in a recent interview with our global chief digital officer, Lubomir Rocher, she discussed a lot of the group's recent investments in some of the London-based accelerator and incubator Founders Factory. So this really highlights for us the focus on being ahead of the curve and identifying opportunities earlier. And a lot of the work we do on a day-to-day basis is with that in mind. The Founders Factory, where they can bring their expertise to the group for the UK and Ireland, and how we can then maximise it and accelerate it back to the customers. So the opportunity in my role is to enable my colleagues across the UK and Ireland business to use the data available to them as proactively as possible to be more competitive and innovative, be it proactively speaking to a new audience from a macro level or tactically capturing key engagement instances that we could maybe build a new keyword list against from search activity. So as in any large company, there is a wealth of data. So I have to simultaneously balance the high level of performance view and then provide that deeper granularity for the specialist in role. So it's a great opportunity for me to have. Our Western Europe CMO, who's the CMO for the UK and Ireland, Stefan Berube, has spoken about the importance of O and O plus O, or online plus offline. So where we're understanding a customer's path to purchase to enhance its messages at various stages. So for example, where does UK and Ireland customers begin their research on products? How much time is spent on the high street versus online looking at prices or reviews? And what's the optimum amount of time for them to be either looking to buy or to researching? And how can we then blend those signals together? How are we capturing that data and maximizing it? So we can learn so much from the data that's there and available. And we have some really exciting opportunities to learn from that online to offline customer journey as we grow e-commerce and personalize our communications. So a little bit more about my role as head of digital operations that sits within the central marketing office, or the CMO. So that's a central function that sits across these divisions within the UK and Ireland. We support all divisions and their subsequent brands with their approach to customer experience, to marketing, to data. And this covers all channels and seeks to continually push the boundaries by testing and learning and driving that innovation. So we aim to deploy the best practice. We capture where best practice is happening in say one brand or one division, and look to industrialize that across the other parts of the business. Always keeping in mind the digital objectives of the group, and making sure that we're all kind of learning on one path as we go forward. So with Stefan as our leader in the UK and Ireland, we have 3 directors who lead the functions. So that's across digital, media, and marketing intelligence. So thinking of that, we have an awful lot of opportunity to pivot between understanding what the target customer is, what influences their purchase, what media to use to engage a new audience or that existing audience, and then interrogating data to build a digital strategy with. So whilst this centralized function means we can operate across all 4 divisions, we are able to test, learn, and industrialize really, really quickly. So just a little bit more about the brands that we have within those divisions. So you'll be able to see that there's a lot of different brands that come underneath the central, or the CPD, ACD, PPD, and luxury divisions. And these appeal to various customers. They operate within various categories, and therefore their approaches to marketing will be very different. A luxury consumer might be different to a mass or a CPD consumer, but they might still buy the same products. For example, a Garnier hair care customer might also buy a Lancome cosmetic product. So how do we, as a CMO team, really maximize the learnings and opportunities for that to make sure that the conversation that's being had at a brand level is authentic, but we're also learning at a group level? So where a multi-category customer exists, the challenge we have is maintaining that relevant dialogue with them. So that throughout their purchase journey, that traverses both online and offline environments. This customer would expect to have a slightly different conversation with each brand, but as a CMO team, we need to make sure that we're capturing that interaction and learning from it to deliver divisional insights that still relate back to the overall objectives of the group. So my role can really be broken down into 3 specific areas. So the first one, measurement. So the standardization of data. So this is where we're looking at consistency of things like tagging plans across our owned websites. So perhaps that's maybe often overlooked and maybe something that's not as, in inverted commas, something as glamorous as maybe content creation at times. But if you think of the fundamentals of the platform where you're capturing those triggers, that measurement is really, really important to make sure that you understand what your customers are doing and how they're interacting with you. It also means that we can measure different parts of the customer journey. So for example, a diagnostic tool that helps customers choose the type of hair product may give us 4 or 5 additional data points that we may not have had we not really paid attention to the tagging plan. We might know their hair type, their hair color, the type of product they use, those type of things that can really help us to have a more informed conversation going forward. So the second area is reporting. Thank you. So the second area is, reporting. So this is the line in the sand to really say how well we are doing against the targets that we've set. So, of course, this isn't going to be anything new for a lot of the major businesses, but Knowledge is power, and making sure that the stakeholders across the business understand how they are performing against their objectives is really, really key. It means that everyone is focused on what they're trying to achieve, and it doesn't mean that we're all kind of going off in different directions, which would not be beneficial and may waste a lot of the efforts that we're doing across our innovation and our marketing. So the focus for reporting is not only the look and feel of the report, but also providing that clarity to our stakeholders and our peer groups to ensure that they can manage their business on a day-to-day basis. And then finally, insight. So once we've made sure we've got the platform for measurement and we are accurately reporting back on the business, we're then making sure we have time to interrogate the data and uncover insights that help us win more effectively. So insights will come in various forms. It might take a project of 2 or 3 months worth of dedication to really pull that insight out. Or it could be something where just combining different data sets together or just kind of putting them side by side, you really then see some kind of insight that pulls out. But either way, we're actively encouraging a atmosphere where we're looking for insights and we're taking the time to learn from the operational excellence that we're putting out there. So those 3 pillars in mind, I just wanted to kind of touch on the complexity of the UK and Ireland business for L'Oreal. So I've already shown the variety of brands that exist within the UK and Ireland, which will all have objectives, they'll all have targets, and they'll have commitments that need to be measured against. So each of these brands will then align to a division, which again has objectives and commitments, not only to the UK and Ireland, but across a wider global community. We can then look at the performance of the UK and Ireland, which is then part of a wider zone aspect. So that might be Western Europe. In the kind of widest context, that might be APAC, etc. So it's looking at those countries working together. So add on top of this a variety of categories that each of the products and brands may work within, and then the competition with each in each of those categories, such as hair care, skincare, and makeup. And we really do have a complex business within the UK and Ireland that we need to make sure we are able to measure and report on most effectively. So that should hopefully just give you a little bit of an insight on what's really important for the group and where the kind of landscape that we will operate within. So we need to be really, really clear and concise about what success is, so we can measure it, report on it, and gain insight from it. We also need to encourage a culture and mindset that understands the data that defines success. So we are working to the same end objective, even if the brand, division, country, or zone approach may vary. So as well as knowing what success looks like, we're also keen to make sure we understand when we haven't achieved success and what we can learn and improve on. There will always be times where we didn't achieve necessarily what we expected. So understanding that and learning from it the next time is really, really, really important. This is why the measurement, reporting, and insight pillars are key. So know what success is, know how to measure it, and then learn from the experience. So thinking a little bit more about the roles that exist within the UK and Ireland. For me, there's kind of 2 buckets. There's your specialists and then there's your generalists. So these are really looking around the human expertise who will have that day-to-day touch with a lot of the data that we're working on. So you might well have a specialist that are using social listening tools. They may be community managing, or they may be using web analytics tools. So each of those specialists will know the right measures to be using or how best to gain insight from the tools that they have on a day-to-day basis. But in potentially their siloed approach, they may not actually be able to see a lot of the generalist insights that can be built. So by defining success and improving the integrity of the data underpinning that success, housing the data reports that encourage collaboration and discussion, we can really make sure that the specialist to generalist blend of expertise is really, really key, is maximised across the group. So those specialists within their silos then become more generalist when we think of the collaboration that happens within the campaign teams, for example. The social listening manager, the community manager, and the web analytics manager can all have an informed discussion using their reports that are lined up side by side. So just to kind of come on to some of the major learnings really so far within my role at the L'Oreal UK and Ireland. So firstly, know what success is and be able to measure it. For example, e-commerce would involve a lot of first and third party purchases that combine our owned online store environments with retailers' e-commerce sites. So it's blending those. So do we have access to those two data sets, and how can we maximize or understand what's going on in those two data sets? Secondly, we have known and unknown purchases that go through our first party and our third party data sets. So where can we learn from repeat purchases, or where can we create audiences from an unknown point of view that we can bring back into our environment and learn more from? Not necessarily immediately to transact, but how can we get more information from them to have a future purchase lined up? And then finally, the devices that those people look at. So where we are getting purchases, or we're getting strong triggers that suggest that those people are ready to purchase, how can we improve the experience on each of those different types of devices? So we know that mobile is very, very important, but if you look at the operating systems across mobile, we might vary from things like bounce rate or things like engagement. So how can we make that seamless experience for all of our different users? Are we then able to break those different components down by really important measures that impact on e-commerce? So revenue, conversion rate, average order value. So having all of that, that's just a very simplistic view of what success might be for one pillar of e-commerce. But just thinking of all the variables and all the triggers that give us that information and some of the channel measures, it shows you how quickly you can build up a lot of different data. So I think from my experience so far is not only considering the channel measures, but also understanding the collective measures. So if we're thinking of, for example, search, one of the success measures for search might be total clicks by a specific keyword. However, a combined collective measure might be the bounce rate for a multi-channel campaign. So search might have a very strong click performance, but maybe suffer from some bounce rate issues. Does that apply the same for some of our social activity? Is that the same for our different devices that are coming in? So just blending those two areas together is really, really key for me, and something I think is very valuable for businesses to understand. So secondly, peak data interest. I've already spoken a little bit about the silos that exist and the different specialist to generalist kind of roles. So again, taking those same examples where we've got specialist roles, if we have a set of tools and data that gives those individuals success, then fantastic. But what we need to do is collectively show that data, piecing it together, and show the halo effect of maybe one channel onto another channel. This essentially drives a lot more collaboration within the teams, has a lot more open discussion, and understands where we are succeeding and where we may be failing. An example of that might be, and I'll use social and search again. So are we understanding where our search key terms maybe have an overlap with our social listening mentions that are happening? So, thinking of maybe some customer care dialogue. Is there a specific product that has some good or bad interactions with our customer care team? And how does that then relate to maybe some of the keywords we're bidding on? So just thinking of how we're blending those two data sets together, and then piquing the data interest with those users. So making sure that data is readily available, easily understandable and digestible, and can encourage that collaboration between teams, and not having the specialists in their own silos, and looking for that more generalist atmosphere across the business. And then finally, really building for the future. So where we've broken down those silos of data, really thinking about how we can kind of almost build, in this instance, a kind of data lake. So you'll have lots of different data flowing from lots of different channels into this central environment. How can you make sure that your teams are easily able to extract what they need from that lake, understand that lake? Is that lake consistent, the data that's flowing into it, to make sure that we know, for example, what category the insight is coming from? Is it hair care to skincare? What brand it's for? What region it might be for within the UK and Ireland? Lots of different components. So thinking of that landscape up front, so you're building for that future, means that when you, in 2, 3, 4 years' time, when there's a completely new trend that we don't know what it is yet, we almost have the platform, the infrastructure in place where we can extract the data quickly. A good example of that might be some of the new trends in voice that we're seeing. So this is, a technology that's very, very exciting, but it challenges how marketers go to market using that technology. Where we maybe previously looking on search engines as the top 4 or 5 placements, now it's a lot more around what's the specific issue that maybe our customers need to have solved for them using that voice technology. So that changes a lot of the landscape, and building this kind of data lake and this repository of data is really, really important. So just to summarize on the final slide here. So really make sure you've defined success. It sounds obvious, but this provides that continuity and focus at all levels across the organisation, specifically for us in the UK and Ireland. So break those silos by piquing the data intrigue across your teams. Combine data sets and put them side by side so that you can collaborate and learn together through the data that you're collecting. And then finally, future-proof what's happening. So think of the opportunities that might be coming and what you need to be doing now to build the right platform kind of going forward. Great.
Brilliant.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was really, really interesting. There's obviously so much thought and strategy that goes into doing what you do and making sure that L'Oreal has, the right ROI for a brand that demands so much,
Yes.
So there's so much going on, the measuring, reporting, insights is so tricky, trying to disseminate all of that divisionally to all those brands that you were talking about, and still keeping in tune with L'Oreal's overall vision. I know that everything that you've sort of covered today, you like to call it the digital cockpit.
Yes, yeah.
I've been told. A rumour spread. So the digital cockpit is, it's a key enabler for driving strategy around measurement.
Yes.
And there's lots of people that you have to convince, essentially, the power of the digital cockpit. What advice would you give to marketers who are bringing in new processes and new tech? How would you advise them on how they bring that in and achieve the ROI
Sure.
through the digital cockpit?
So we're around 2 years in the UK and Ireland into our kind of digital transformation with the digital cockpit. So this is where we're harvesting data and making it more interactive and more visible for our teams across the group. I think the biggest learning in those 2 years is really to make sure that there is a wealth of data that we could potentially have in those. So understanding again what that success looks like, I think. We've recently gone through the process of making sure we are essentially almost boiling up all of that data into a simple, easy to read success executive summary type thing. So I think that for me would be the first step. Really understand what drives that success through those data sets, and then making that as visible as possible across the group. So whether that be regular email communications out to the teams, whether that be screens across the group that make sure they're summarizing that data more effectively, ingraining that into meeting culture. That may be the first thing that you see where you come in on a Monday morning, 9 o'clock, and then that maybe sets the tone for the rest of the week. It doesn't necessarily mean you review every single metric, but maybe where some change has happened over the last 7 days, over the last month, over the last quarter, have that understand why that's happened, and then have the course correction plan discussion happen within that meeting. So I think it's definitely not saying ignore everything that's being measured, but really understand what the success is and then where you need to really focus your attention to make sure you're going forward. And that's what's helped us, the cockpit idea, where you're effectively flying the plane with all of the data and you see lots of different gauges and indicators there. There is going to be so much data that you can potentially look at. So it's really kind of cutting through that and getting to the core of what if there is an issue, what that issue is and how we can address that, I suppose.
Yeah. Brilliant, thanks. So the questions have come in fast and furious, so I will fly through some of them. What is the challenge? Obviously, we've spoken about your challenges today, but what is a specific challenge facing marketers around measurement and performance optimization today? And what will be the next challenge?
The next challenge. So I think what's the challenge today, certainly what I see within the UK and Ireland group for L'Oreal is very much around realizing what's important to kind of catch it. And again, I as the head of digital operations, a lot of the platform is the kind of focus for me. So even things basic as kind of tagging content correctly. It's often maybe overlooked, but that's for me is a fundamental importance when going out to market, because if we don't track that specific piece of content, firstly, we don't know the impact of that content. We can't then go back and review that content in a month, 6 weeks, a year later. And really, therefore, we can't learn as much as we possibly could have from that content. So I think a big challenge is making sure that that platform's in place and that appreciation of what we're taking a step or taking a breath, sorry, and thinking, what do we actually want to be able to measure? What do we actually want to learn from the piece of activity that we're doing? And making sure we've got the infrastructure in place to be able to do that. That's a big challenge. I know I spoke briefly about voice, but for me, that's a really interesting part. How do we understand the impact of voice that's happening for not just within search, but across the entire customer journey? And how do we as marketers and digital marketers really tap into that technology and get the best from it? So that's, I think, a really, really exciting kind of challenge coming up. But for me, it would always kind of come back to understand the platform, understand what you're trying to measure, and then make sure you have the different either customer journey mapped out, and therefore what you're trying to track and what you're trying to learn from what you're doing, I suppose, on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you picked up on voice, because that's all we're talking about really right now. But how's L'Oreal tapping into new AI developments and innovation in your marketing strategy?
So I talked a little bit about Founders Factory, and that's for us is a really, really interesting time for us. So we look at the opportunity of the Founders Factory, where it's really bringing to our attention a lot of new technologies such as AI. And being able to, again, encouraging that test and learn type culture, where the Founders Factory might bring us an idea or have a startup where there's an interesting proposition. It might then mean that we kind of road test that a little bit, understand, what's the pros and cons of maybe bringing that AI technology, for example, if that is the technology, into some of our customer understandings or customer campaigns. And then we test. And again, the CMO team thinking of how we can test, learn, and industrialize, we would do that. So there will be different factors based on what technology we might bring in, but we are looking to continually evolve. And as Lubomir has done globally, we are always looking to push the boundaries and push that forward. So at the moment, it's an exciting new time for us. It's a great relationship with the Founders Factory setup as well that we have within the UK and Ireland. So I think there'll only be great things that come from it. But then what that looks like in terms of an actual kind of shiny box type thing, it's an exciting time. We it can continually evolve, I suppose.
Hard to predict.
Exactly. Yeah.
And another question, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah.
How do you see the role of data changing in marketing over the next 5 years?
I think, with GDPR over the last kind of year, the changes in how we talk to customers will be really, really interesting. The trust and what's, the reason why we need to get people engaging with our brands really kind of comes back to life a lot more for us. So, I often talk about where we're having first-party data or first-party experiences kind of coming to our brand sites, for example. Understanding what customers do within our brand sites is really, really important to help that ongoing conversation. So there needs to be a reason why that people engage with us and give us their content, and we shouldn't abuse that. We should make sure that we build that trust with them. But for me, it's then the ongoing value of having that exchange of data, thinking again of the online to offline. Is there something we're capturing from a customer online that they can really benefit from offline? Maybe it's capturing some kind of interest around, again, hair care, and then pushing them to an offline store on the high street. Does that fit in with their day-to-day, week-to-week attitude towards shopping and how we can really kind of blend those two worlds together? So I think for me, that data is really, really important. Thinking of online to offline, thinking of how our customers interact with our different brands. For me, it's making sure that we're set up to capture that data and interact with them effectively off the back of it.
Yeah.
And just because, thinking again of maybe some of the technology challenges we have, some of our products you might have a window of about a day or a week to be able to kind of follow up on a purchase cycle or incentivize our customers to do it. Some might be 2 to 3 months. So do we have the technology in place to activate off the back of that data as well, that personalization kind of piece? As a customer myself, I don't want brands, necessarily sending me lots of messages on a product that I've already purchased. So how do we make sure that we're really effectively using that data that we're collecting as well?
Yeah, and every data point is a human behind it.
Exactly,
so it's
exactly.
About keeping that trust and transparency there. Yeah. Thanks for that. So my final question of the day is, to round up, can you define what a successful modern day CMO looks like?
Oh, great. I would of course always say Stefan, as he's my CMO director. Exactly. So for me, I think the opportunity, I think, for the modern day CMO is to understand the technology within the company a lot more. The biggest challenge or opportunity area that I think we can improve within the UK and Ireland in my role is the blend between the IT kind of world and the marketing and the technology world. So really those two worlds, the collaboration between them, it should be non-stop. There will be amazing new tech that's coming into the company, and then the marketers and the digital teams activating off the back of that technology, it would be huge. So I think we have a very good blend in the UK and Ireland, but I think that would be, for me, the modern day CMO, or where that role will progress to, would be the blending of those two worlds together. How does the CMO take on more IT responsibility, and really how does the IT world take on more marketing and kind of digital kind of business access as well? So those two worlds really coming together to make the benefit, I suppose, for the end customer and us within as employees as well will be really, really huge.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. It's been great having you here this morning. I think our audience are going to have lots of Monday motivators to take back to their businesses and how to conquer the CMO challenge. And of course, thank you to our partners Domo, who will be joining us in the next episode of the CMO challenge on the 3rd of December. So we look forward to you joining us then, and have a great day.